Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here. Welcome to my review of episodes 1 and 2 of Star Trek Discovery. I had the chance to watch it with a bunch of friends the other night. We all got together, enjoyed some ice cream cake, and celebrated Star Trek's return to television after 12 long years. The general consensus among everyone there was that we really enjoyed these first 2 episodes and can't wait to watch the rest of the series. So sit back, relax, enjoy my review of the first 2 episodes, and be warned they are spoiler-filled, so if you haven't watched them, you should go out and do so before watching this video. Unless you don't mind being spoiled, then by all means go ahead. But don't say that I didn't warn you. Episode 1 of Star Trek Discovery, The Vulcan Hello, a title that when I first heard it didn't make a lot of sense. I was really curious as to what they were referring to, and we do find out in the course of this episode. It turns out that the Vulcans encountered the Klingons many centuries ago, and learned very early on that Klingons will not respect you unless you show a sign of strength, and in every subsequent encounter, the Vulcans fire first. The Vulcan Hello is Michael Burnham referring to this action by the Vulcans. First off, I'm going to say it, Star Trek on television is back, and in a really big way. Cards on the table to begin with, I really enjoyed these episodes. I'll start off with a few issues I had with this first episode before moving on to what I really liked. First off, I have to say some of the dialogue in this episode was a little bit stilted. For example, at the beginning with Burnham and Georgiou on the surface of the planet, the dialogue was just a little bit too expositional.
The ambient radiation from a nearby meteor drilling accident dried out their water table. If we can get in and out without making contact, we can steer clear of General Order 1.
That piece of dialogue, for example, I'm pretty sure the captain knows why they're there and what the problem is. That is purely for the benefit of the audience watching, and it comes across as a little bit awkward. Second, the use of the Klingon language got a little bit tiresome at times. I'm not opposed to them using the Klingon language, and the fact that they went back to Mark Okrand's original Klingon language that was used in the TOS movies and early TNG, and sticking to it is very admirable. However, I felt the scenes using the Klingon language went on a little bit long, and some of it seemed quite stilted and not very natural sounding. I understand it must be very difficult to act in a completely different language than the one you're used to, not to mention underneath all the prosthetics and false teeth and that sort of thing. So it would have been nice if those scenes came across as a little bit more authentic. Unfortunately, the use of the language makes it feel not quite natural. Moving on to the things I absolutely loved about this episode, the production design is absolutely incredible. The sets and the sound effects and the sound mixing and the visual effects are all absolutely beautiful. Absolutely no complaints about any of that. It's really, really fun to look at and to listen to. The Klingons absolutely feel very alien here. I really like this exploration of their culture, and while the new look definitely is jarring, I feel it is not a detriment to them at all. I really like the alien feel here. They really feel like the dreaded other. With the exception of the couple issues I had with some of the dialogue early on, I do have to say for the most part the writing is very excellent, and I really liked the interplay between the various characters. Lieutenant Commander Saru is a total standout character, and I really enjoyed the dynamic between him and Commander Burnham. It's very obvious that Sonequa Martin Green's character is the core of the show, and she really does step up here and inhabit that role in a very authentic and very convincing way. I also really like the dynamic between the Captain Philippa Georgiou, played by Michelle Yeoh, and Sonequa Martin Green's character of Michael Burnham. This really does feel like a pairing that has worked together over the past 7 years, and I would really like to see more of an exploration of that relationship over the past 7 years. As my friend Will Wynn said online, I would totally watch a 7-year run of Star Trek Senjo. Some people have brought up online that it has been established in canon that Klingons don't tend to care about the disposition of their dead bodies. They refer to them as an empty shell that is just discarded once the spirit has moved on to Sto-vo-kor. However, it's important to remember that the producers of the show have said that the Klingons as presented in Discovery are not a monolithic culture. We see many different versions of their beliefs and honor system from different houses and different worlds, not just the Klingon homeworld. And also, a little tiny bit of Trek trivia here. There is an object called a Klingon mummification glyph that is shown during Spock's testing in Star Trek IV. So we do know that Klingons do have some sort of death rituals, at least at some point in their past, which is something that T'Kuvma may be bringing forward as he becomes the new leader for this new age of Kahless that he wishes to bring about. One more quick little continuity reference I wanted to bring up. The Klingon world of Hatoria is mentioned, which is a nice little continuity nod. Star Trek fans may remember that as the planet that Worf is a governor of in Q's alternate future in All Good Things. And finally, a couple more little Easter eggs in the episode. Captain Georgiou has a bottle of Chateau Picard in her ready room, as well as these books on her bookshelf. This photo was released on social media showing the titles of the books on her shelf, and I think Star Trek fans might find the titles a little familiar. So at the end of the first episode, The Vulcan Hello, we're left with a cliffhanger ending. Michael Burnham has committed mutiny against her captain and attempted to take control of the ship in order to fire on the Klingons. However, the captain has regained consciousness and wrestled control of the bridge back from her first officer. Representatives of all 24 houses of the Klingon Empire have arrived, and T'Kuvma is attempting to unite them all in battle against the Federation, a situation that he is able to engineer thanks to the predictability of the Federation's negotiation-first tactics. As Burnham languishes in the brig, battle rages on and the Senjo is critically damaged. For those of you out there who may have only watched the first episode without subscribing to CBS All Access or catching the second episode, I fear you may have missed out on something great. This episode again ends in a cliffhanger, but it very much sets up the conditions for the rest of the season. And after watching this episode, I understand what the creators meant when they said that it's almost as though Star Trek Discovery has two pilots. These 2 hours definitely serve as the first pilot, but setting up a very different set of circumstances for next week where we get our, quote, second pilot. If part 1 is setting up all of the characters and their interactions, part 2 is definitely where all the action happens. The face-off between the Klingon Empire and the gathered Starfleet ships is definitely visually impressive, and the action is incredible. I love the return to Star Trek that is about something. Here we see the clash of cultures, whether that's the human/Starfleet culture of do not fire first and peace above all else, to the Vulcan culture espousing total and complete logic, trumping emotionalism, to the Klingon culture that says that fighting is the only honorable way to conduct yourself. These three cultural views clash in a spectacular way in this episode, and it really sets the stage for further events in Discovery. Once again, Sonequa Martin-Green is terrific as the main character, Michael Burnham, and her relationship with Captain Georgiou once again takes center stage as we are given a few flashbacks that show her initial arrival on the Shenzhou. This is a dynamic I would have loved to have seen more exploration of, but with the events of this episode, it looks as though we may not get that unless the season does contain a lot of flashbacks, which I kind of hope it does. There are definitely some interesting tidbits in this episode, most notably about Klingon history, how people have not seen or heard from the Klingons much in the past 100 years, with a few exceptions. The Battle of Donatu 5 is referred to in this episode and is a really nice continuity nod. The battle, of course, was mentioned in the episode The Trouble with Tribbles. Other continuity nods include House Dagor, which was featured in Deep Space Nine, and House Mokai, which Captain Janeway's holographic character in the Killing Game episode of Voyager refers to herself as being a part of. Another fun Easter egg in this second episode were the names of the Federation starships that joined them, among them the USS Shran, the USS Taplanahath, and the USS Ride. Shran, of course, being a character from Star Trek Enterprise, the Taplanahath being the matron of Vulcan philosophy from Spock's Test, as well as the name of the ship that landed on Earth in Star Trek First Contact. The USS Ride is named for astronaut Sally Ride. All in all, this was a great follow-up to the first episode. The ending I did find quite shocking. Spoilers again if you have not watched these episodes, so you've been warned. The death of Captain Georgiou is something that I expected to happen at some point during the series. I wasn't expecting it this early on. I remember during this scene commenting out loud that you do realize your sparring partner is in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, right? And then she was very shortly killed thereafter, so I kind of had to say, well, okay, never mind. And finally, the death of Tukuvma was a big surprise to me. Chris Obi's character I had assumed would kind of be the baddie for the entire first season. The fact that he's killed here and is almost made a martyr makes him more dangerous. And I'm thinking that the character of Valk is going to be much more important than I had initially thought. It looks as though he's going to be taking up the mantle of Tukuvma and leading the war against the Federation, so I can't wait to see where this story goes from here. The ending for Michael Burnham, in which she is charged with mutiny among other crimes and sentenced to life in prison, was a big shock to me. It's interesting to see somebody committing mutiny in Star Trek and actually being punished for it. You don't tend to see that a lot. So that ending was a refreshing change for sure. It's very clear from these two episodes that Star Trek Discovery is presenting a very different style of storytelling that we've never seen in Star Trek before. This to me is a good thing. I really like that this show breaks out of the mold of what we've seen before and gives us something new. We don't have the traditional setup of a captain and their crew going out on a mission, episodic, week to week. Instead, a story that builds on itself week after week, focusing on a type of storytelling that is different than what we've seen before. It's going to be a really interesting ride. I hope they do well. I feel like these two episodes are a very strong start. Definitely not perfect, but I do have to say probably one of the better 2-hour series premieres that Star Trek has ever done. Comparing it to, for example, Encounter at Farpoint, Emissary, Caretaker, and Broken Bow, I think this might be the strongest of all of them, with the possible exception for me of Emissary. I really did like that episode. But these two episodes are very strong right out of the gate. I would like to have gotten to know more of the Senjo's crew a little bit better, but unfortunately, given the limitations of the time constraints and moving on to the next chapter of the story, I guess that's probably not really possible. I know a few of those crew members will be transferring over to Discovery because we do see them later in the season, but it would have been nice to get to know these guys a little bit better before we have to move on. Well, in closing, I definitely want to say that this iteration of Star Trek is a bunch of different things for me. It's a return to the Prime line, which I really like. I had no huge problem with the J.J. Abrams movies. They had a lot of what I like about Star Trek in them, but not what I like the most about Star Trek in them. And this also feels like a return to Star Trek that's really about something. The slower pace of a television show means that you can explore different ideas in more depth than you can in just a 2-hour movie. So Star Trek is always best when it's on television, and I think we're in for a pretty wild ride with Star Trek Discovery. There are definitely some dissenting views out there, but a lot of people that have really enjoyed it as well. So I'd like to hear from you. What did you guys think about the first 2 episodes of Star Trek Discovery? If I have to nail down a rating for them, I would have to say that I think that the first episode, the Vulcan Hello, would rate, I'd say 3.5 dilithium crystals out of 5. And the second part, the Battle at the Binary Stars, would rate a 4 out of 5 rating. I enjoyed that one a little bit more. There's, a little bit more culmination to the story, a little bit more contained story, even though the ending is a cliffhanger. It really feels like it sets up the conditions for the rest of the series, and I can't wait to see where we go from here. I assume next week's episode will be more of the series proper. We'll get an introduction to some of the characters we haven't seen yet. We'll actually get to see the USS Discovery, which is really exciting. Captain Lorca still has to make an appearance, Lieutenant Stamets. It looks like Doug Jones, as well as the helmswoman. I can't remember her name at the moment, unfortunately. It looks as though they get a transfer over to Discovery because we see them in promos on the bridge of the Discovery. So really looking forward to seeing how that all shapes up. Join me for the ride for the rest of this season. It's going to be a lot of fun. There will be ups and downs, I'm sure, but definitely starting strong here. Like this video if you liked it, please share and subscribe if you haven't already for Star Trek Discovery news and reviews, as well as news and reviews and other videos from all across the Star Trek universe. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, and Twitter. Links are all in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and as always, live long and prosper.